Welcome everyone. In today's session, we will be discussing about the short story A Cup of Tea by Katherine Mansfield. To begin with the discussion, let me quote Katherine Mansfield. I want, by understanding by myself, to understand others. I want to be all that I'm capable of becoming. So Katherine Mansfield was born on 1888 in Wellington, New Zealand. Her father was a chairman of the Bank of New Zealand, and she was the middle child of three sisters and one brother. And it is said that she experienced two pregnancies in her early adulthood, which led to her sexual proximity. So she had a life with various partners and bisexual experiences. And eventually, when she was 23, she met John Middleton Murray and got married. But their marriage was tarnished by her affairs, their careers, and her discovery of her disease. And in 1918, she discovered she had tuberculosis. And her life was not that of something great, but when we are talking about her influences, she was influenced by her surroundings clearly. Her exposure to much of the world and her sexual encounters was left a clear mark on her writing. Anton Chekhov greatly impacted her style, and she even quotes him in letters. And another influences in her writing career were Dorothy Richardson, D.H. Lawrence, and Dostoevsky. When we are talking about her writing style, she is very clearly a modernist writer and very descriptive in her nature, and she utilized symbols, metaphors, and tons of imagery. And her characters, they are usually portrayed as warm-hearted and very sensitive. And her short stories consist of everyday concerns. Her aim was to make the reader see. Now let's move on to the short story. So a brief summary of the story will be given now. So the story was actually published in the collection known as The Storyteller in May 1922. It later appeared in The Dow's Nest and Other Stories in 1923. So in this particular story, the protagonist is a very snobbish, wealthy woman who only lends a helping hand to a poor girl because she thinks that it will make her look good. So through this particular story, the author tries to portray a clear class difference and the attitudes of the people of different classes. So let's say, example, materialism and class differences are much explored in this particular story. So the story narrates one episode in the life of the central character, the rich woman. Her name is Rosemary Fell. She was used to spending money for any whims of hers. So the first scene itself, Mansfield describes how the shopkeeper flattered her taste of beauty. So the key moment of the story occurred when Rosemary, she came out of the shop and she met a young girl. She asked for some money for a cup of tea. So the response of Rosemary really shocked the readers because it was quite unpredictable. She invited the girl to her home for a cup of tea. So after Rosemary brought the girl to her house, her husband reached there, Mr. Philip, and he was very surprised, even to say shocked, by the fact of seeing such an unusual visitor. So Rosemary insisted that it is not her whim, that she wants to take care of the future of the stranger, this young girl. So the girl is introduced herself as Miss Smith, but the attitude of Rosemary all of a sudden has changed. Because when Mr. Philip just commented that Miss Smith is pretty. So the last question in the story raised doubts about self-confidence of Rosemary. So after the comment of Mr. Philip on Miss Smith, Rosemary's attitude has completely changed. She decided to send Miss Smith out of her house by giving her some money. So Catherine Mansfield wants to show the attitude of Rosemary. Rosemary is dependent on the money of her husband. She wasn't sure about her attractiveness. And even the last question, am I pretty? It reminds of the beginning of the story. Rosemary felt was not exactly beautiful. Pretty? Well, if you took her to pieces. So one of the conclusions that we can reach from this story is the insecurity that Rosemary is feeling. So now let's go for the analysis of the story. The story is narrated in the third person by an anonymous narrator in a very conversational manner. Appearances have a lot of importance in the story. So the writer Mansfield tries to describe the class difference and the hypocrisy that is very dominant or seen in New Zealand, especially during the early 20th century. And Rosemary appears to be a very caring and a kind woman in the beginning, even though she has selfish intentions behind it. She only helps the poor girl because she thinks that it will improve her status, not the life of the young girl. More than the life of the young girl, it is her own status among her friends that she cares a lot. And this reflects how the upper class society only acts for their own benefit and they only help the poor to gain praise. And Rosemary led a very luxurious life. She is unaware of the hardships of people like Miss Smith go through, especially during the winter season. Even if it was pretentious, she tries to be a kind of and sympathetic towards Miss Smith. However, the insecurity and the jealousy turned her selfish again. She becomes mean. When she kicked Miss Smith out of the house, she could have at least given her some proper amount. Instead, she gives a mere $3 bill. She just wanted to have an adventure. It was like a play to her, but when it comes to her own interest, she decides to stop her little game. And she is really jealous of the poor girl. After her husband calls her pretty, lovely, bold, her insecurity stops her from offering her pretentious help. She makes the girl live by giving her some money. At first, she picks up £5, then keeps two and only gives three to the girl. So she can help, but she chooses to not help that girl. She is too concerned about her own feelings. The girl told her she might kill herself if Rosemary showed no empathy. So through the story, the author tries to establish that whatever the status a woman of Rosemary's type, as a woman after all, a frail, a jealous, despite her desire to appear otherwise. So the important themes that can be explored from the story is first of all, it is class consciousness or class differences. So usually this term is used in social sciences and political theory, especially in Marxism, refers to the belief that a person is holding, especially regard to the social class or economic rank in a society, or based on the structure of their class in society, their interests are there. So the disparity of classes was very evident in this story. Miss Smith has no money to buy her meal. She is desperately asking for money for at least a cup of tea. While there are rich people like Rosemary who waste money on flowers and shiny objects, and they don't need for their existence at all. Despite having so much money, they don't help others. While the wealthy people indulge in materialistic things, their luxurious lifestyle, the poor are exposed to hunger and suffering. So Rosemary in the story represents the mentality of the upper class people. So the major theme of the story is obviously class difference between Rosemary and Miss Smith. So it clearly portrays that the upper class people are materialistic and selfish. They have everything. They have money. They have position, but still they will go behind insignificant, expensive things. So the velvet box in the story that symbolizes this materialistic attitude of Rosemary. On the other hand, the character of Miss Smith, so they don't have enough to get ends meet. They lack the money even for to afford their basic needs like food and shelter. So there the cup of tea symbolizes their requirement. So we can make a contrast between the velvet box in this antique shop and the cup of tea that is offered to Miss Smith. So the next important theme that we can explore in the story is materialism. So it is like the attraction or the want to have materialistic possession in their life. So the exact character in the story who shows or whose nature is very materialistic is Rosemary. Her intentions are centered on materialistic things. She desires for the shiny velvet box and she fails to buy it. That obsesses for long, and she presented it as a big tragedy that happened in her life. She then helps Miss Smith to make herself look good, but the moment her vanity is hurt, the moment she realized that insecurity came up, she drops her idea of helping her. So this reflects how the rich lack emotions and empathy, and they keep reaching towards materialistic goals. As a woman, Rosemary is inclined to make herself look beautiful in order to establish her worth. This is another materialistic attitude of the society that the author condemns in this story. So people forces women to feel insecure about themselves. Women are only valued for their beauty. Appearance is given more importance than the personality. Thank you.